Adrian stood at the edge of the skyscraper's observation deck, looking out over the glittering city. Each light reflected like a jewel, tiny points of power that mirrored his own life. He straightened his tie and inhaled deeply, letting the hum of the city fill his senses. From the corner office to the streets below, everything belonged to him. Or so it seemed. Headlines across newspapers bore his name, celebrating his deals, his influence, his genius. Boardrooms bowed at his arrival. Investors nodded obediently at his presentations. Adrian had built himself into a monument of success, a figure untouchable, untarnished, untamed. Yet beneath the veneer of confidence, a subtle unease had begun to stir, a whisper he chose to ignore. As the evening sun dipped behind the horizon, casting the city in golden shadow, he smiled faintly at his reflection in the glass. This was the life he had worked for. Every sleepless night, every calculated risk, every sacrifice to climb higher. And yet, even as the skyline stretched endlessly before him, there was a flicker of tension he could not name. Something had shifted. He didn't know it yet, but this evening would mark the first tremor in the empire of his life, a subtle crack that would widen into a chasm. Earlier that week, Adrian had moved through the world like a king among men. Cameras flashed as he entered the gala hall, their light reflecting off his crisp suit. Crowds clapped politely, some with genuine admiration, some with the fear and respect reserved for those who hold power. He shook hands, offered firm smiles, and delivered a speech that drew nods from executives and journalists alike. Every gesture, every word was precise, deliberate, a demonstration of his control. Contracts were signed with confident strokes of his pen, deals that could shift entire markets changing hands under his authority. Each handshake was a transaction, each compliment a tool of influence. Adrian thrived in this environment. Power suited him like armor. Yet even here, in the midst of applause and celebration, a small voice whispered doubts. He caught himself glancing at his phone repeatedly, a subtle itch beneath the polished exterior. It was supposed to be inconsequential, a habit, a check. But the habit was a seed, and it was beginning to grow. By midnight, the boardroom glamour had faded into darkness. Adrian's apartment felt hollow despite its luxury, the skyline now a silent witness to a restless mind. The glowing screen of his phone illuminated his face, pale against the city lights. He stared at it, hypnotized, waiting for a message he couldn't predict, for a response that would somehow determine the success of his day, or the failure of his self-control. Each unread ping was a dagger. Each notification ignored by the other party sent waves of doubt crashing over him. He had never been powerless before. He had built empires, made fortunes, commanded respect. But here, in this quiet night, he was a man stripped bare, subject to an unseen will, dependent on a whim he could not control. Decisions that once came effortlessly now faltered. His thoughts, once sharp, were muddied with obsession. The city, so alive outside, seemed to mock him with its indifference. Hours passed. The night deepened, and her silence became a roar in his mind. Adrian paced, then sat, then stood again. Sleep eluded him. Hunger turned to disinterest. Every sound in his apartment felt amplified. Each flicker of light from passing cars a reminder of the world continuing without him. The calm confidence he wore in boardrooms, the authoritative posture, the precise gestures, all dissolved under the pressure of anticipation. He thought of her smile, her voice, her attention, and the cruel way it had become a drug. One moment, praise and warmth, the next, absence and indifference. He recognized patterns too late. He realized that power was not just about influence over others. It was about influence over self. And in that silence, he discovered a truth more terrifying than losing a business deal or a public reputation. Desire could overpower even the strongest man. Standing once more by the window, Adrian's reflection stared back at him. The city sprawled below, indifferent, alive, unbending. And there he was, not the invincible figure the world knew, not the man who commanded rooms and headlines. He was fragile, consumed by an urge he could not satiate. The empire he had built was vast, but it had failed to protect the most essential domain, himself. He realized that night that he hadn't lost her, hadn't lost a deal, hadn't lost status. He had lost autonomy, the inner sovereignty that defined a man beyond wealth or fame. Desire, unchecked and unexamined, had stripped him of the one thing he could never reclaim from the outside world: control over his own mind, his own choices, his own being. In that moment, the city and its lights, the world and its applause faded. All that remained was the harsh, unyielding truth. Power could be structural and impressive, yet it could crumble in the presence of a desire it did not master. The streets of Florence bustled with color, noise, and tension. Merchants hawked fabrics in the piazzas, their voices clashing with the clatter of horse-drawn carts on cobblestones. Yet beneath the market's vibrant life, the city breathed intrigue. Political factions whispered behind velvet curtains, alliances shifted like the wind, and betrayal was never far from a noble's door. Niccolò Machiavelli moved through this world with eyes wide open, taking in every gesture, every smile, every slight and bow. He was young, but already he understood that appearances were only the surface of power. Courtiers smiled with teeth white as pearls, but their eyes betrayed ambition. Princes spoke of virtue, yet plotted murder in private chambers. In this city of beauty and art, Machiavelli learned his first lesson. Humans do not act purely for morality. They act for advantage, for survival, for self-interest. It was here, among paintings, palaces, and political whispers, that Machiavelli began to dissect human behavior. Florence was a laboratory, each citizen a subject, and Machiavelli's genius lay not in judgment, but observation. He cataloged the patterns of loyalty and betrayal, trust and deceit, love and exploitation. Every gesture, every subtle inflection, became a piece of a vast, intricate puzzle, the puzzle of power. Machiavelli spent countless hours in his study, quill in hand, candlelight flickering over parchment. He wrote endlessly, not of idealistic dreams or moral philosophy, but of what actually occurred in the courts and streets. He observed how rulers maintained power, how subjects complied or rebelled, and how love and fear intertwined with ambition. He noted that loyalty was transactional. People obeyed until obedience became inconvenient. They flattered until flattery cost them. And when their self-interest collided with duty, they chose self first. Machiavelli understood that humans were not inherently virtuous or evil. They were pragmatic. A ruler could not depend on morality alone. Clarity, strategy, and foresight were essential. It was during these hours of study that Machiavelli wrote The Prince, a book that would later shock centuries. Not for advocating cruelty, but for insisting that one see the world as it is, not as one hopes it to be. He explained that people could betray, deceive, or manipulate, and the wise would anticipate these moves rather than fall victim to them. This principle, Machiavelli realized, applied not just to politics, but to every interaction in life where power, influence, and desire intersected. In one of his earliest court appointments, Machiavelli witnessed firsthand how loyalty could dissolve in an instant. A trusted advisor, once praised for his diligence, was cast aside the moment his advice no longer served the prince's advantage. Allies who smiled in the morning would plot by night. Machiavelli noted these moments, recording them with precision and detachment. He realized a profound truth. People love loyalty, but only until it costs them something. They will flatter, obey, and love. But the moment their interest is threatened, they turn. Desire for validation, fear of conflict, or ambition itself can erode even the strongest bonds. This lesson was harsh but necessary. Machiavelli's mind, unlike many, did not recoil from the dark realities of human behavior. He saw them, understood them, and accepted them. Through these observations, he began to see parallels with desire itself, not just political loyalty, but personal relationships, ambition, and attraction. People, whether rulers or lovers, often surrender their power unconsciously, guided by fear, need, or hope. And here lay the secret. Power is not just structural, it is psychological. One could control armies or kingdoms, yet be powerless in the private theater of human emotion. By candlelight, Machiavelli's quill scratched across the parchment with deliberate strokes. He wrote not to please the virtuous, not to comfort the moral, but to instruct the wise. The Prince became a manual of pragmatic clarity, a guide to seeing beyond illusions. He dissected human motives with surgical precision, exposing truths most preferred to ignore. He explained that cruelty could be necessary, fear could enforce order, and deception could be survival. But Machiavelli's genius lay not in advocating these acts as virtue. They were tools. What mattered was understanding human behavior and acting with strategic foresight. And this perspective applied far beyond kings and generals. It applied to anyone navigating desire, loyalty, and influence. Machiavelli also observed that those who failed often did so because they sought validation. They wanted to be loved, admired, or approved. They wanted loyalty without cost. They wanted compliance without risk. And in doing so, they surrendered the one thing no army or wealth could guarantee: their autonomy. By the end of his studies, Machiavelli reached a conclusion that would echo through centuries. Control does not come from cruelty or domination. It comes from clarity. Understanding, anticipation, and discipline were the true sources of power. He realized that humans are predictable, but only if observed without wishful thinking. Desire, emotion, and ambition could be mapped, studied, and anticipated. One could not force loyalty, but one could understand the conditions under which loyalty is given or withdrawn. One could not command love, but one could recognize the illusions that masquerade as love and avoid being trapped by them. Machiavelli's brilliance was in seeing the world unromantically, yet deeply. He did not demonize human nature. He accepted it as it was. And in this acceptance lay freedom. By seeing clearly, one could navigate desire and power without being crushed by it. Centuries later, these lessons remain relevant. Desire, attraction, and emotional manipulation follow patterns as old as Florence itself. Men and women alike fall into traps of validation seeking, dependency, and projection. Just as princes once misread allies, modern men misread affection and attention, surrendering power to charm, praise, or approval. Machiavelli's insight offers a test. Observe without reacting impulsively, measure without judgment, and hold your own agency above fleeting approval. The key is not to manipulate, but to remain the observer, to understand the currents of emotion without being swept away. His life teaches that awareness is the ultimate tool of power, whether in courts, boardrooms, or matters of the heart. For Adrian, the lessons of Machiavelli would arrive in a different form. Where Florence had intrigue, he had modern romance. Where courts had betrayal, he had social games of attention and desire. And just as princes once misjudged their allies, Adrian had misjudged his partner. He surrendered control, not through malice, but through longing, through hope that her attention could validate his worth. By understanding Machiavelli, Adrian could begin to see the structure behind human desire. It was no longer about conquest or dominance. It was about self-mastery, observation, and disciplined engagement. Desire itself could be studied, anticipated, and respected without losing one's own agency. And for the first time, Adrian glimpsed a path forward, a way to reclaim the power he had unknowingly given away. Adrian, once confident and untouchable, begins to notice subtle shifts within himself. He laughs a little too softly, walks a little too cautiously, and pauses before speaking, wondering if his words will earn her approval. It starts with minor adjustments, a softer tone in conversations, jokes measured for effect, gestures carefully observed. His friends notice, but he brushes it off as consideration. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet surrender is taking place. His sense of self, once robust and unwavering, bends toward her reactions. Every compliment he receives from her sparks warmth. Every perceived slight triggers unease. Adrian's mind, trained for corporate strategy and negotiation, now turns inward. He analyzes every message, every glance, every subtle inflection. He is no longer observing, he is reacting. The man who commanded boardrooms now trembles in the theater of a single relationship. Her influence grows not through overt manipulation, but through inconsistency. One day praise and attention, the next cold silence. Adrian adapts to these subtle signals, like a puppet learning new strings. He smiles when she smiles, worries when she worries, hesitates when she hesitates. The very independence he once prized now crumbles under the weight of her moods. In board meetings, he catches himself replaying interactions in his mind. How would she react if he spoke up? How would she feel if he asserted himself? His professional confidence erodes. Decisions that once came naturally are now measured, questioned, and revised. The trap is invisible. There is no malicious intent on her part. Her charm is natural, her attention genuine at times, but Adrian's desire for approval amplifies its effect. He is no longer guided by strategy, he is guided by reaction. Late at night, Adrian sits alone in his apartment. The city hums outside, oblivious to his internal collapse. He scrolls through messages, rereads texts, and imagines meanings that may not exist. He realizes with a growing sense of horror that he is not merely attracted. He is dependent. Desire has become validation-seeking, and validation-seeking has become submission. The very power he had built, the autonomy he had cherished, now rests in her hands. Every notification, every like, every word feels like a verdict. His emotional state is no longer self-determined. He experiences euphoria at her praise and anxiety at her silence. The balance of his mind shifts with her attention, not with his own volition. Adrian sees it clearly now. The trap was never her charm, her beauty, or her affection. The trap was his willingness to surrender his inner authority in exchange for approval. The more Adrian invests in her attention, the more unstable he becomes. He confuses desire with dependency, love with validation, presence with approval. The illusion is complete. He believes that her recognition defines his worth, that her attention secures his identity. In truth, she has never asked for this. She moves naturally, unaware that her moods have become the compass of his life. Yet for Adrian, this illusion dictates every decision, every thought, every heartbeat. His friends notice the change. Once decisive, he now hesitates. Once self-assured, he now questions. Once independent, he now bends. But he cannot see the pattern. He only feels the tension, the growing emptiness, the gnawing fear of being unchosen. Adrian begins to realize that desire itself can be a weapon, not of the other person, but of the self. When unchecked, it can strip a man of agency, reducing him to a shadow of his former self, dancing to invisible strings. Finally, a moment of clarity arrives, not through confrontation, but through observation. Adrian sees himself in a mirror, figuratively and literally. He sees a man whose smile is rehearsed, whose laughter is cautious, whose decisions are dictated by anticipation of her approval. He realizes the real trap is internal. Desire alone does not enslave. The surrender of power to validation does. Every man who allows his sense of self to hinge on another's approval falls into the same snare, whether in love, friendship, or ambition. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately. Just as a prince can lose his state by trusting the wrong ally, a man can lose his inner kingdom by seeking validation from the wrong source. The laws of power, like the laws of desire, are immutable. Clarity and discipline are the only antidotes. Adrian's first lesson is stark and unforgettable. Attraction is inevitable, but submission is optional. Desire need not compromise dignity. The moment a man places his identity in another's hands, he becomes vulnerable, not to her, but to himself. The days and nights grow heavier. Adrian's obsession intensifies. He analyzes her every word, inferring hidden meanings, fearing silence, craving acknowledgement. His work suffers, his sleep suffers, his joy evaporates. This escalation is familiar to anyone who has allowed desire to overpower self-discipline. The mind, once a tool of strategy and clarity, becomes a labyrinth of projections, anxieties, and imagined scenarios. Every interaction carries stakes it never had. Every absence feels like betrayal. And yet, he cannot stop. The very act of observing himself fall only deepens his dependency. He begins to understand the nature of the trap. It is self-perpetuating. Validation feeds desire. Desire feeds dependence. Dependence erodes autonomy. Autonomy, once surrendered, cannot be reclaimed without conscious effort. In one quiet moment, Adrian sits alone on a rooftop overlooking the city. The lights glimmer like distant stars. For the first time, he asks himself a single piercing question: who controls me? No answer comes from her. No answer comes from the city. The answer, he realizes, comes from within. Desire is inevitable, But surrender is a choice. Power, like love, can be observed, understood, and respected without being relinquished. This insight marks the beginning of a transformation. Machiavelli's teachings echo in his mind. The wise observe without illusion, maintain clarity amidst temptation, and safeguard agency above fleeting approval. Adrian's journey through the trap has shown him that true mastery does not lie in conquest of another, but in mastery of self. The battle is internal. The real enemy is not her charm, nor the unpredictability of human desire. It is his own willingness to surrender power for validation. Adrian retreats from the constant ping of notifications, the anxious scrolling, the obsessive waiting. He shuts down his phone for hours at a time, even days. The urge to check, to respond, to seek approval burns inside him, but he resists. For the first time, there is silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of emotional turbulence. The emptiness is uncomfortable, almost unbearable, but within it, clarity begins to emerge. Without distraction, he notices patterns he had never seen before. The moments when his happiness depended not on achievement, but on attention from her. This silence becomes a laboratory of self-observation. Each craving, each flicker of anxiety, each imagined scenario is recorded in his mind. He notices the instinct to react, the compulsion to seek validation, and he begins to resist, not externally, not through confrontation, but internally through awareness. The temptation to break the silence is overwhelming. A message appears. It is innocuous, a simple greeting, but Adrian feels the old pull. He can respond, apologize for absence, show interest, try to reclaim lost attention. But he does nothing. He lets the message sit. The minutes stretch into hours. The old anxiety gnaws at him. The compulsion to act feels like survival instinct. Yet he watches it without judgment, without reaction. This, he realizes, is the first test, not of her loyalty, but of his discipline. Machiavelli's lesson becomes real. Power is not about external victories. It is about internal mastery. The ability to remain calm, to observe without acting impulsively, is strength itself. Days pass. Adrian practices emotional detachment, not coldness, not indifference, but observation without surrender. The ups and downs of desire no longer dictate his mood. He notices the subtle triggers, a word, a glance, a tone, and yet he remains grounded. He begins to reclaim his mental space. Meetings, work, friends, exercise, all regain focus. He experiences pleasure without needing approval, attention without obsession, desire without submission. Emotional detachment is not emptiness. It is a protective clarity. By refusing to act on every impulse, Adrian builds an inner fortress. He feels for the first time the difference between reacting to desire and mastering it. Yet the journey is not linear. Old habits rise like storms. Impulses surge. Memories of past failures resurface. Self-doubt whispers. Adrian faces the chaos within, the compulsions, the fears, the imagined betrayals. He journals each feeling, naming the thoughts, observing the triggers. He realizes that surrendering power had never been about her. It had been about his own unresolved insecurities. The mind, once a battlefield of projections, begins to clear. The shadows of dependency shrink under conscious attention. Each confrontation with inner chaos strengthens him. The more he observes without reacting, the less the old patterns control him. Desire remains, but it no longer enslaves. A week later, another message appears. The old Adrian would have replied instantly, crafting a careful response to elicit approval. But now he waits. He does not analyze. He does not justify. He simply observes. Hours pass. The desire to respond remains, but it is no longer urgent. The need to validate himself externally has been replaced by a quiet self-reliance. This practice, seemingly simple, is revolutionary. In the past, every interaction with her had been a test he failed. Now every inaction is a demonstration of discipline. He begins to understand Machiavelli's subtle principle. Mastery is about the ability to govern oneself before attempting to govern others. Adrian begins to notice more than his own impulses. He observes her actions, her moods, her subtle cues, but without emotional entanglement. The patterns of her behavior, once triggers of anxiety, now appear as data, information to be understood, not weapons to wound him. He sees moments of inconsistency, the fluctuations of charm and withdrawal, but they no longer control him. He begins to predict her behavior, not to manipulate it, but to recognize it without surrendering to it. This is the heart of the inner test, observing without reaction. Desires, games, emotional fluctuations, all become visible, intelligible, manageable. Power, he realizes, exists first internally and only then externally. Over time, Adrian feels a transformation. His heart beats steady in situations that once would have triggered panic. Decisions are clear and grounded. Conversations with her, when they occur, are free from the desperate need for approval. He recognizes the profound truth. The trap of desire is never her doing. It is the mind's willingness to surrender. When a man masters his impulses, he cannot be manipulated. He cannot be destabilized by inconsistent attention. Desire is no longer a threat, but a tool for growth and awareness. Machiavelli's insight, once abstract, is now lived experience. The ability to observe, to wait, to remain disciplined is power in its purest form. Adrian realizes that the strongest position is not dominance over others, but mastery over oneself. Adrian steps back into life with renewed perspective. Work, friends, passions, all regain their rightful place. He engages with her and with the world, not out of need, but out of choice. His energy is no longer tied to external validation. The difference is palpable. He smiles without calculation. He speaks without fear of judgment. He listens without obsession. Power, previously external and fragile, now resides firmly within. The inner test has been passed, not as a single moment of courage, but through persistent discipline, observation, and refusal to surrender agency. On a quiet evening, Adrian stands overlooking the city once more. He reflects on the journey, the obsession, the collapse, the surrender, and now the reclamation of self. Desire, he understands, is natural, but mastery is deliberate. The moments when he had almost lost himself were lessons in the subtlety of influence, the fragility of ego, and the importance of internal sovereignty. He smiles finally, not because of conquest or victory, but because of freedom, the quiet, unshakable power that comes from governing oneself. After weeks of silence, she returns, not with an apology, not with explanation, but with the same charm and subtle games that had once unbalanced him. A smile that once made his heart race now appears like a puzzle to solve. Adrian notices every subtle gesture, every inflection in her voice. He listens, but unlike before, his attention is not tethered to hope or fear. He observes like a calm observer watching a storm, knowing the weather may rage but will not touch him. Her laughter, once intoxicating, now appears deliberate. She tests boundaries, nudges, prods, and waits for reaction. And this time there is none. Every word, every pause, every glance is a cue. Adrian sees patterns he could not see before. She tests for attention, loyalty, emotional surrender. In the past, these were triggers. Now they are signals. He realizes manipulation works only if the target surrenders. The lessons of silence and observation have made him immune to her subtle tactics. Her attempts to unsettle him fall flat, like waves breaking against a rock. This clarity is empowering. He understands the principle. Manipulation is never absolute. It succeeds only when the other person abdicates their own sovereignty. Adrian does not need to respond immediately. He does not overanalyze. He does not chase validation. Each moment of her charm or provocation is received, noted, and stored, but never acted upon impulsively. Her smile, her playful tone, even her moments of cold withdrawal no longer trigger panic or anxiety. Adrian's calm presence becomes an unspoken boundary she cannot cross. The storm of desire and manipulation rages around him, but internally he remains untouched. This unshakable observation is the embodiment of the inner power he cultivated during his silence. For the first time, the dynamic shifts. The same tactics that once disarmed him now reveal their futility. She senses the change. The desperation she expected is absent. She tests, but her attempts at control meet no resistance, yet also no surrender. Adrian realizes the subtle law of power. Dominance is irrelevant when the other person does not play the game. In letting go of need, he has neutralized the manipulative force she wielded unknowingly. The balance is restored, not through aggression, not through retaliation, but through calm mastery of his own reactions. He is no longer a pawn in a game designed to elicit fear, desire, or compliance. In one decisive moment, Adrian chooses to walk away, not out of defeat, but because he no longer needs to participate in emotional games. The conversation ends not with anger or persuasion, but with quiet presence. Her attempts to provoke, charm, or unsettle no longer matter. He has reclaimed his internal freedom. Desire no longer dictates his behavior. Autonomy does. Walking away is not a retreat, it is an affirmation. By refusing to engage in manipulation, he demonstrates true power, the ability to preserve self-respect, clarity, and agency, no matter the external chaos. As he leaves, Adrian feels an unexpected calm. The turmoil, the sleepless nights, the obsessive thoughts, all of them begin to fade. He realizes the storm never truly existed outside of him. It was his mind that surrendered to it. This calm is not emptiness. It is confidence without arrogance, strength without aggression. It is presence without reaction. For the first time, he experiences power that does not seek to dominate, control, or punish. He understands the paradox. By letting go of the need to control others, he gains true influence over himself. Sitting quietly that night, Adrian reflects on the entire sequence: the obsession, the collapse, the silence, the return, the tests, the calm. Each moment was an opportunity to surrender or reclaim. He sees clearly now, manipulation and emotional games cannot succeed against someone who observes without surrendering, who engages without need, who acts from clarity rather than impulse. The lesson resonates deeply. Power is not a tool to be wielded against others, but a state of internal sovereignty. By mastering himself, Adrian has become unshakable, immune to the chaos of desire and manipulation. Over the following days, Adrian integrates this understanding into all areas of life. He approaches work, friendships, and personal relationships with calm presence. No longer reactive, he speaks, listens, and acts with intention. Interactions that once provoked anxiety now pass without disturbance. The internal chaos that desire once triggered has been replaced with steady observation. The lessons of silence, patience, and discipline become tools for navigating the modern landscape of relationships. He feels liberated, not because he has won a game, but because he no longer participates in games that seek to strip him of agency. In a final moment of reflection, Adrian realizes that true power lies not in controlling others or seeking submission, but in observing without attachment. Desire, charm, emotional fluctuation. They are elements of life, not threats to self-sovereignty. He smiles, understanding Machiavelli's insight in a new light. Strategy and power are only meaningful when grounded in internal mastery. Others may attempt manipulation, games, or tests, but the man who controls himself remains untouchable. The calm in the storm is not luck, it is discipline, observation, and the deliberate refusal to surrender. Adrian walks forward, ready to engage with the world, desire, and connection, but now as a master of his own mind. Adrian walks into a quiet cafe, sunlight spilling across the tables. She is different, calm, genuine, no hidden agenda, no tests, no subtle manipulations. For the first time, conversations feel effortless. There is laughter without calculation, curiosity without suspicion, and connection without the unspoken tension of who holds power. Adrian notices the difference immediately. There is no need to impress, no need to seek validation. His previous experiences, desire, obsession, collapse, feel like distant echoes. As they talk, Adrian senses equality. She respects his thoughts, he respects hers. Neither demands submission, neither seeks dominance. They share experiences openly, revealing fears and hopes, vulnerabilities without the fear of judgment. The conversation flows without strategy, without hidden motives. Adrian realizes this is a form of power he had never known. Mutual recognition that does not require control, manipulation, or conquest. In past relationships, Adrian projected expectations, fears, and desires onto women. Now he sees her as she is, an autonomous person, not a reflection of his insecurities. She does the same. There is no test, no trap, no desire to elicit a reaction. It is a space free from the games that once dominated his life. He feels a lightness he has never experienced. Desire without anxiety, connection without dependency, love without strategy. Presence itself becomes a source of fulfillment. Time passes, and their relationship grows not from need or obsession, but from choice. Both maintain autonomy, neither sacrificing self-sovereignty for affection. Adrian notices a subtle joy in this balance. Love no longer feels like a battlefield, a negotiation, or a hierarchy. It is a dance of mutual respect and freedom. Each interaction reinforces that power is not about controlling others. It is about preserving integrity while sharing life with someone equally sovereign. Adrian reflects on the lessons learned from past relationships, Machiavelli's insights, and his own journey through obsession, collapse, and calm observation. He understands that the real power in love is not possession, it is discipline, self-awareness, and emotional maturity. By mastering himself first, he can now engage in authentic connection. The previous chaos, silence, longing, anxiety, becomes a guidepost, a contrast that makes this new relationship richer, more grounded, and more meaningful. They walk together through the city streets, each confident and composed yet connected. Emotion is present, but it does not dictate behavior. Desire exists, but it does not control thought. Adrian feels a sense of harmony he had never experienced. Love and power are not opposing forces, but complementary ones. Emotional expression and personal sovereignty coexist. He realizes that the strength of this connection lies not in dominance or submission, but in mutual empowerment. Each supports the other's autonomy, creating a partnership of equals. At night, Adrian journals, capturing the clarity of this new relationship. He reflects on his journey: obsession, manipulation, silence, observation, calm, and finally, mutual respect. He writes, "True love is conscious, deliberate, and free from the illusions of need or control. It is a space where power serves presence, empathy, and understanding, rather than fear, desire, or dominance. The lessons of the past are integrated into daily life. He no longer fears loss, need, or games. He understands his own boundaries, his own desires, and his own strength. Even in disagreement, there is no collapse. Conflicts are resolved with communication, not emotional surrender. His calm presence balances the relationship, fostering trust and authenticity. They share ambitions, joys, and challenges, yet neither compromises self-respect. Adrian experiences the rare blend of love and autonomy, where neither gives up identity for affection. He recognizes this as the culmination of all the work he has done. Internal mastery allows external harmony. Adrian smiles, watching her laugh genuinely. He understands now that power is not in control, manipulation, or conquest. True power is self-possession, emotional discipline, and the ability to engage authentically with another sovereign being. Love and power, once opposites, now coexist. Desire is a spark, not a chain. Connection is a bridge, not a trap. Adrian feels liberated, not because he conquered someone else, but because he has mastered himself. The city outside continues to bustle, indifferent to his inner transformation. But inside, Adrian has built an empire of calm, presence, and love that serves truth, not fear. Adrian reflects on Machiavelli's wisdom in a new light. Strategy, observation, and understanding human nature are essential, but the ultimate mastery comes from within. He has navigated manipulation, obsession, and chaos to find a space where love and autonomy coexist. His heart and mind are aligned. He now knows power that serves empathy, connection, and truth is unshakable. Desire is no longer a threat. It is an experience shared with respect and consciousness. Adrian walks forward, ready for life, love, and purpose, fully sovereign, fully human, fully free. The first light of morning spills over the city skyline. Adrian sits alone in his high-rise apartment, a cup of coffee in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. The streets below hum with life, indifferent to his presence. Yet inside, a quiet storm has passed, leaving clarity in its wake. He recalls every betrayal, every obsession, every sleepless night, and realizes none of it was about anyone else. It was about surrendering his own power to external forces. The truth hits. Freedom comes not from dominating others, but from mastering oneself. Memories return. The woman whose silence once shattered him, the relationships fueled by validation, the endless chasing that left him empty. But these ghosts no longer carry weight. He observes them as lessons, not regrets. Each failure was a mirror, reflecting where he had ceded control of his own emotions, his decisions, his self-worth. He sees clearly now. Desire unchecked is fragile. Emotional dependency is a cage. Real power is invisible to the outside world, yet unbreakable inside. Adrian thinks back to Machiavelli, his writings and the lessons of power. Strategy without self-mastery is hollow. Observation without introspection is blind. He realizes that every challenge, every manipulation, every emotional trap was designed by life itself to teach him discipline. The city's chaos outside becomes a metaphor for his mind. Once scattered, reactive, and fearful, now ordered, deliberate, and calm. He puts down his phone and lets silence envelop him. No pings, no alerts, no compulsions, just presence. He notices a subtle power in this calm. Without aggression or control, he holds space for himself and for others. The need to prove, chase, or manipulate dissolves. For the first time, Adrian understands that mastery is silent. True power does not announce itself. It sustains itself quietly within. Walking through the streets later, Adrian watches people interact. Gestures, tones, subtle manipulations, social dances. Where once he would have been drawn into projection and desire, he now observes neutrally. Patterns reveal themselves. Power is often surrendered to those who create emotional dependency, to those who exploit insecurity. He smiles inwardly. He has learned the most important lesson. Never give away the one thing you must always control, yourself. Adrian meets a partner who respects his boundaries and shares autonomy. They engage fully without fear, need, or competition. Desire exists, but it does not demand dominance. Love exists, but it is mutual, conscious, and freeing. He experiences what he could never before. Connection without surrender, attraction without obsession, intimacy without loss of self. Power and love are no longer opposing forces. They coexist as complementary energies, each enhancing the other. Adrian journals, reflecting on every lesson learned, emotional traps, manipulations, obsession, silence, and finally presence. He writes that real power is not about conquering or controlling others. It is about ownership of one's thoughts, emotions, and decisions. It is about presence, clarity, and integrity. He acknowledges that true freedom comes from self-awareness. Only when he mastered himself could he navigate relationships, desire, and life without surrendering sovereignty. He spends a quiet evening in a park, observing nature and people. There is no compulsion to act, no craving for validation, no projection. He notices joy, love, and ambition in others without needing to claim or dominate it. He can witness life fully while remaining centered, grounded, and sovereign. This presence is the culmination of his journey, the power to engage without fear, the freedom to connect without losing himself. Adrian reflects on the essence of his transformation. Desire can be a tool, not a cage. Observation is more potent than reaction. True power is internal, invisible, and unshakable. Connection thrives when both parties maintain autonomy. Emotional mastery allows conscious, empowered choices. He understands that no one can strip power from a man who owns himself. Desire may tempt, chaos may arise, but internal sovereignty is untouchable. As night falls over the city, Adrian stands at his balcony. The lights shimmer below, indifferent, yet he feels a quiet triumph. No phone buzz, no urgent message, no external affirmation is needed. He smiles, finally free. His empire is rebuilt, not in wealth or influence, but in discipline, clarity, and conscious love. He has faced manipulation, desire, obsession, and collapse, only to rise stronger. Power now serves truth, empathy, and presence. Adrian turns from the skyline, walking into his life with calm authority, fully human, fully sovereign, and fully free.